The temple had stood for millennia, forgotten by time and shrouded in darkness. Its towering stone columns, engraved with ancient symbols, spiraled upward into the gloom, their purpose long lost to mortal memory. Beneath its arches, flames flickered on shattered altars, casting jagged shadows across the broken marble floor. The air was thick with a foreboding presence, the kind that weighed on the soul and whispered of doom. It was here, in this forsaken sanctum, that Asher, the last sentinel of light, now stood. His silver hair clung to his sweat-drenched brow as his fingers tightened around his celestial spear, Lumina. The weapon, forged by the gods themselves, hummed faintly, pulsating with a blue glow that seemed to pierce the darkness around him. "You cannot win," a voice thundered, echoing through the vast chamber like the growl of a storm. From the shadows, the Demon King emerged. His hulking form towered above Asher, his obsidian skin rippling with veins of molten fire. Massive wings, feathered with flames, spread behind him, their heat distorting the air. Two curved horns jutted from his head, framing a face that was both cruel and eerily calm. His crimson eyes bore into Asher with an intensity that promised annihilation. "I don't need to win," Asher replied, his voice steady despite the tremor in his limbs. "I only need to hold you back long enough." The Demon King smirked, a predatory grin that revealed jagged teeth. "For what? The gods you serve have abandoned this realm. You stand alone, mortal." But Asher wasn't entirely alone. Hidden beyond the temple walls, Layla, the Oracle of the Flame, knelt in prayer. Her golden robes were singed at the edges, her hands trembling as she traced intricate patterns into the ash-laden ground. She was the key, the only one who could summon the Gate of Eternities, a portal that could banish the Demon King back to the abyss. But the ritual was perilously slow, requiring time that Asher wasn't sure he could give her. The Demon King stepped forward, the ground shaking with each stride. "It's amusing, Sentinel, that you would throw your life away for a world so undeserving. Tell me, does your faith blind you to the futility of this fight?" Asher raised Lumina, the spear blazing brighter as if defying the Demon King's words. "Faith has nothing to do with this," he spat. "I fight because someone must." Without warning, the Demon King lunged, his claws tearing through the air. Asher darted to the side, narrowly avoiding a blow that splintered the stone floor where he had stood. He retaliated with a thrust of Lumina, the spear's radiant energy surging forward in a crackling arc. The Demon King raised an armored arm to block, the attack leaving a scorch mark but failing to break through his infernal hide. "You're slow," the Demon King mocked, his voice dripping with disdain. Asher didn't answer. He was already moving, his body a blur of precision and agility. He leaped onto a broken column, using it as a springboard to hurl himself at the Demon King. The spear struck true, burying itself in the demon's shoulder. The beast roared, a sound so deafening that it seemed to shake the very fabric of the temple. But Asher paid the roar no mind. He twisted the spear, releasing a pulse of light that forced the Demon King to stagger back. Yet, the victory was short-lived. With a guttural snarl, the Demon King seized the spear's shaft, yanking it free and hurling Asher across the chamber. Asher hit the ground hard, the impact knocking the wind from his lungs. Dazed, he rolled to his feet just in time to see the Demon King charging at him, his wings trailing fire. In the corner of his vision, Asher glimpsed a faint golden light emanating from the temple's inner sanctum. Layla. She's close, he realized. Hold on just a little longer, Asher murmured under his breath. The Demon King's next attack came like a storm. He unleashed a torrent of molten energy from his outstretched palm, a searing wave that reduced everything in its path to ash. Asher threw up Lumina, the spear's light expanding into a shimmering shield. The heat was unbearable, but the shield held, barely. "You fight well for a mortal," the Demon King growled, circling Asher like a predator toying with its prey. "But you cannot delay the inevitable." Asher's breath came in ragged gasps. He was running out of strength, and the Demon King knew it. But retreat was not an option. With a burst of adrenaline, Asher charged, his spear a blazing comet in the dim chamber. He feinted left before striking right, managing to slice through one of the Demon King's wings. The beast bellowed in fury, his remaining wing unfurling as he struck back with claws that glowed like molten steel. Asher barely managed to dodge, the claws grazing his side and leaving deep, smoking gashes in his armor. "You'll die on your knees, Sentinel," the Demon King hissed, his voice a venomous promise. Before Asher could respond, a thunderous boom reverberated through the temple. A golden vortex began to materialize at the far end of the chamber, its light blinding and its power immense. Layla's voice echoed faintly from beyond, her chant reaching its crescendo. The Gate of Eternities was opening. The Demon King turned his gaze toward the vortex, his expression twisting in rage. "No," he roared, his wings flaring as he surged toward the light. Asher, bloodied and battered, stepped into his path, planting himself between the Demon King and the gate. "You're not going anywhere," he said, his voice laced with defiance. The Demon King snarled, his fury burning hotter than the infernos of the abyss. "Then you will die first." The two clashed once more, their battle escalating to a scale that shook the temple to its core. But as the Gate of Eternities grew brighter, Asher couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The light was too unstable, its pull too chaotic. And then, from within the vortex, a shadow began to emerge. The shadow within the Gate of Eternities was unlike anything Asher had seen. It was vast and formless at first, an amorphous void darker than the deepest abyss. But as it seeped through the vortex, it began to take shape, a twisting, shifting mass of obsidian tendrils that writhed and clawed at the air, radiating a malevolence that dwarfed even the Demon King's presence. Asher's stomach twisted with dread. This wasn't part of the plan. Layla was supposed to summon the gate to expel the Demon King, not unleash something far worse. "What is that?" the Demon King growled, his confidence momentarily faltering as he turned to face the shadow. Layla's voice rang out from the sanctum, laced with panic. "Asher, something's wrong. The gate, it's been corrupted." "Corrupted?" Asher shouted, narrowly dodging a fiery swipe from the Demon King, who had taken advantage of his distraction. "How?" "I don't know." Layla's voice trembled, her chant faltering as she struggled to maintain control over the vortex. "This isn't just a gateway, it's become a prison. And something's trying to escape." The vortex pulsed violently, its golden light flickering as black tendrils snaked further into the temple. The temperature in the chamber dropped sharply, frost creeping along the fractured floor even as flames licked the walls. The Demon King's fiery wings flared as he took a step back, his lips curling into a snarl. "Whatever this is, it does not belong in this realm. Even I can sense its chaos." Asher didn't have the luxury of contemplating the irony of the Demon King being unnerved. The tendrils were growing more aggressive, lashing out indiscriminately at everything in their path. One narrowly missed Asher's shoulder, carving a deep gouge into the stone behind him. "Layla," he called out, his voice desperate. "Shut the gate down. Whatever it takes, stop it from opening fully." "I'm trying." Layla's cry was strained. Her golden light was dimming, her strength visibly faltering as the shadow pressed against her will. "It's feeding off the Demon King's presence, it's using his power to anchor itself here." Asher's mind raced. If the Demon King was the catalyst, then the only solution was to sever that connection. But that meant one thing: the Demon King had to die, and quickly. As if reading his thoughts, the Demon King turned to Asher, his crimson eyes blazing with fury. "If this abomination consumes our world, it will be because you meddled in forces you do not understand, Sentinel." "You think I don't know that?" Asher snapped, lunging forward with Lumina. He wasn't sure if he had the strength left to finish this, but he had no choice. The Demon King met Asher's charge head-on, their clash shaking the temple to its foundations. Claws raked against glowing steel as the two combatants traded blow after blow, their battle growing more ferocious with each passing second. But the shadow was no longer content to wait. It surged forward, its tendrils coiling around the pillars and dragging them down like fallen giants. The ceiling groaned ominously, fragments of stone raining down as the temple began to collapse. Asher. Layla's voice cut through the chaos. You have to get out of there. If the temple falls, we're all doomed. I'm not leaving until this is finished. Asher yelled back, ducking under a clawed swipe and driving Lumina into the Demon King's chest. The spear's light flared brightly, and for a moment, the Demon King staggered, black ichor spilling from the wound. But it wasn't enough. With a roar of defiance, the Demon King seized the spear, snapping it in half with a single powerful twist. Asher froze, his heart sinking as the weapon's light flickered and died. The spear had been his only hope of wounding the Demon King deeply enough to defeat him. Now, all he had was his wits, and the fleeting realization that he was outmatched. The Demon King's smirk returned as he loomed over Asher, his claws dripping with molten energy. You fought well, Sentinel. But this is where your story ends. As the Demon King raised his arm to deliver the killing blow, a piercing scream echoed through the chamber. No. Layla stood at the edge of the sanctum, her body wreathed in golden flames. Her outstretched hands crackled with raw power as she hurled a massive wave of energy at the Demon King. The blast struck him square in the chest, sending him crashing into the far wall with enough force to shatter the stone. Layla, what are you doing? Asher shouted, scrambling to his feet. Layla didn't answer. Her golden light grew brighter, her voice rising in a powerful incantation that made the very air vibrate. The vortex began to shrink, the shadow writhing and howling as if in agony. But the strain on Layla was evident. Blood trickled from her nose, her knees buckling under the weight of the power she was channeling. Asher's heart clenched. Layla. Stop. You'll kill yourself. I have to finish this, she cried, her voice breaking. If I don't, there won't be anything left to save. The Demon King recovered, his rage now mingled with desperation as he turned his attention to Layla. You dare to challenge me, Oracle? He surged forward, flames erupting around him as he prepared to strike her down. Asher didn't think, he simply moved. Summoning the last reserves of his strength, he threw himself between Layla and the Demon King, tackling the towering beast to the ground. Go, Layla, he shouted. Finish the gate. The Demon King roared, his claws sinking into Asher's armor. Pain seared through him, but he held on, refusing to let go. If this is my end, Asher growled, then you're coming with me. The temple quaked violently, the vortex collapsing in on itself as Layla poured the last of her strength into the ritual. The shadow's tendrils recoiled, the abomination screaming as it was dragged back into the void. But as the light of the gate began to fade, the Demon King lashed out one final time. A fiery blast erupted between him and Asher, hurling them both apart. When the dust settled, the temple was in ruins, the gate of eternity's gone, and so was the Demon King. Asher lay motionless among the rubble, his body broken but his spirit defiant. Above him, Layla's tear-streaked face came into view as she knelt by his side. You did it, she whispered, her voice trembling. You stopped him. Asher's lips curled into a faint smile, his eyes fluttering shut. It's not over yet, he murmured. For in the distance, a faint, malevolent whisper echoed through the ruins, promising that the darkness had not been defeated, only delayed. The cold whispers lingered long after the gate of eternities had vanished, like the residue of a nightmare refusing to fade. Layla cradled Asher's battered body in her arms, her tears falling freely onto his bloodied face. His chest rose and fell in shallow, labored breaths, the light of Lumina, even broken, faintly flickering at his side. "You have to hold on," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I can heal you. I just need time." Asher's lips twitched into the ghost of a smile, his voice a rasp barely audible over the distant groans of the collapsing temple. "Time. Something I don't think we have." Layla shook her head vehemently, golden sparks of light forming in her palms as she began to chant. "You don't get to give up, Asher. You're the last sentinel, and we still need you." But before she could begin her healing spell, the ground trembled violently. A fissure opened near the center of the ruined chamber, spilling forth black smoke that reeked of death and decay. Layla froze, her eyes widening in horror. From the fissure emerged the Demon King, his body scorched and his movements sluggish, but his presence as terrifying as ever. His molten veins burned brighter now, fueled by an unholy rage that seemed to defy his near defeat. "You thought you could banish me," he snarled, his voice resonating with fury. "I am the Abyss. You cannot destroy me. You can only delay the inevitable." Layla stood, her golden aura flickering weakly as she faced him. "You're wrong," she said, though her trembling hands betrayed her fear. "You're bound to this plane now. We severed your connection to the Abyss. You're weaker, vulnerable." The Demon King's laughter was a chilling, guttural sound. "Weaker. Perhaps. But still far stronger than you." Asher forced himself to sit up, leaning heavily on the broken half of Lumina as he rose to his feet. His entire body screamed in protest, but he ignored the pain. "Layla," he said, his voice firm despite the blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. "You need to leave. Now." "I'm not leaving you," she snapped, glaring at him through her tears. "You have to," Asher insisted, his tone leaving no room for argument. "If he kills you, everything we fought for will be lost." Layla hesitated, torn between her duty and her heart. But before she could answer, the Demon King lunged at them, his claws carving through the air with terrifying speed. Asher reacted instinctively, using what little strength he had left to shove Layla out of the way. The Demon King's claws struck him instead, tearing through his armor and sending him crashing to the ground. "Asher!" Layla screamed, her voice raw with anguish. The Demon King loomed over Asher, his claws dripping with the Sentinel's blood. "This ends now, mortal." But before the Demon King could strike the killing blow, Asher drove the broken shard of Lumina into the demon's leg. The blade ignited with a burst of light, forcing the Demon King to stagger back with a roar of pain. Layla seized the opportunity. Summoning every ounce of her remaining strength, she unleashed a torrent of golden fire that engulfed the Demon King, forcing him to retreat further toward the fissure. "You will not win," Layla cried, her voice echoing with divine fury. "This world will never belong to you." The Demon King snarled, his wings flaring as he prepared to retaliate. But as he raised his claws, the fissure behind him began to widen, the shadowy void within it pulsing erratically. For the first time, the Demon King looked uncertain. "What is this?" he demanded, glancing over his shoulder as the fissure began to pull at him with an invisible force. Layla's eyes widened in realization. The gate. It's collapsing completely. It's pulling him back into the abyss. Asher struggled to his feet, clutching his side as blood seeped through his fingers. He looked at Layla, his expression grim. "Then we have to make sure he goes." Before she could protest, Asher charged the Demon King, his broken spear glowing faintly in his grasp. The Demon King turned, roaring in defiance as the fissure's pull grew stronger, dragging him toward the void. Their clash was thunderous. Asher struck with everything he had left, his every blow forcing the Demon King closer to the edge. But the Demon King fought back with equal ferocity, his claws tearing into Asher with brutal precision. "Asher, no!" Layla cried, rushing forward to help. "Stay back!" Asher shouted, his voice laced with desperation. "This is my fight." With one final, defiant roar, Asher tackled the Demon King, driving him to the brink of the fissure. The void's pull was overwhelming now, dragging both of them toward its endless depths. The Demon King clawed at the ground, his molten eyes blazing with rage. "If I fall, Sentinel, you fall with me." Asher smiled through the pain, his grip on the Demon King unrelenting. "That's the idea." The fissure surged, its darkness consuming them both in a blinding flash of light. The silence that followed was deafening. The fissure closed, the darkness vanishing as if it had never been. The temple was still, its ruins bathed in the faint glow of dawn breaking on the horizon. Layla stood frozen, her hands trembling as she stared at the spot where Asher had disappeared. Her heart ached with the weight of what had just transpired. He was gone. Her legs buckled, and she sank to the ground, tears streaming down her face. "You promised," she whispered. "You promised we'd see this through together." The faint glow of Lumina's broken blade caught her eye, lying amidst the rubble. She reached for it, clutching it to her chest as if it were all she had left of him. But then, a voice, weak and familiar, pierced the stillness. "Layla." Her head snapped up, her breath catching in her throat. Emerging from the shadows of the ruins was Asher, his body battered and his armor scorched, but alive. "You didn't think I'd let him have the last word, did you?" he said, his lips curling into a faint grin. Layla ran to him, throwing her arms around him as fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "You idiot," she sobbed. "You reckless, stubborn idiot." Asher winced but managed to chuckle. "I'll take that as a compliment." Days later, as the sun set over the horizon, Layla and Asher stood at the edge of the ruined temple, gazing out at the world they had fought so hard to protect. "It's over," Layla said softly, though her voice was tinged with lingering sadness. "For now," Asher replied, gripping the hilt of Lumina's shattered blade. "The Demon King is gone, but the Abyss will always find another way. We'll have to be ready." Layla nodded, her golden light flickering faintly as the weight of their battle settled over them. "Then we'll face it together." Asher smiled, the fire of determination rekindling in his eyes. "Together." And as the first stars appeared in the twilight sky, the Sentinel and the Oracle turned to face the future, ready for whatever came next. The end.